This is the first video in the series about variables. At the end of this series, you'll understand the roles of variables in software, be able to identify the three pieces of a variable: its identifier, its value, and its data type. You'll know the syntax rules for creating identifier names and know how to create a variable in Python. You'll understand how the program processes changes in the value of variables. So today we're taking our very first step towards learning about Python and how to write software. We'll be learning about how to create variables, and this is the very first tool in the programmer's toolbox. Remember that the programmer's toolbox is just a fun idea that we made up at UMW that kind of signifies the fact that programming is just using a collection of tools to solve problems. And the programmer's toolbox fundamentally has 6 different tools in it. The very first one is variables, and we'll be learning about the other 5 tools later on this semester. Once you know the 6 tools in the programmer's toolbox, you can create absolutely any software on the planet. They all use the same fundamental 6 building blocks. So let's dive right in and start talking about variables. A variable is a mechanism that allows us to store data in computer software. So you might be wondering, well, that sounds pretty basic. Why is that so important? Well, computer programs need to be able to work with data. So variables act as kind of the memory for your software that you're creating. Without variables, your software wouldn't be able to keep track of any data. And data is really essential for pretty much all software. Think about if your bank account wasn't able to remember how much money you had deposited, or if your computer wasn't able to remember your password to help you log into a website. Being able to remember data is something that's essential in many software programs. Now, soon you might be writing your very first program here at UMW, and often the first program that students write in Computer Science 110 is a program that generates some random values, and so it appears to have this chaotic behavior. Perhaps you've written that already, perhaps you'll be writing that later this week. If you remember that program, or if you kind of imagine that you had written this program, it stores some information that's a result of a mathematical function. And the variables in the program are what allows the computer to keep track of the values that are generated and also how many times a value has been generated. I'm going to show you the code in the chaotic program, chaos.py, just for reference. And again, if you haven't written this program yet, it's not essential to understand today's lecture. Just look at this example Python program, these 5 lines of Python code, and we're going to identify the variables in this code. So in this code, there's 2 different variables. The first one is this value x, and then the second one is this value I. And without these 2 variables, those 2 characters in this program, the whole rest of the program wouldn't do anything at all, because we wouldn't be able to remember values, we wouldn't be able to process that information that's being generated by the computer. So those 2 individual characters there represent the variables in this particular program, and they're the components of the software that allow us to store information as we're processing it in this example. So we know that a variable is a way of storing information so that we can recall it or remember it within our software. Every variable has 3 components, and we're going to talk about those parts next in this video series. The 3 components are the identifier, the value, and the data type, and we'll be talking about the significance of each.